right now.
Yeah, he got to kind of scratch that itch, and something I want to get into. You brought this up last week, Wes, a little bit of a tangent, but are we a little bit maybe overblowing some of the moves of coaches going different places right now, like going back to the NFL or stepping into different roles? Are we overblowing that just a little bit? Because if you kind of pull the curtain back, there's some different reasons, right? Like Halfley and Chip Kelly leaving sitting head coaching jobs, they were on the hot seat,
Mm-hmm.
People tried to bring that up about Elliott. I don't really know if that's right. I mean, this is a program that
By bring that up, you mean
that's why he left. He was on the hot seat. Thank you for clarifying that for me because I wasn't very clear. Yeah, he left. He left because of NIL. He left because of the portal, right? He left because he was on the hot seat. And Elliott addressed the NIL stuff like, I'm not a guy that runs from a challenge, right? It's kind of like what Nick Saban said. A lot of people were positing that Nick Saban finally got tired of NIL. No, Nick Saban's like, hey, if you're a coach, you adjust to it. You do the job.
Well, I don't think, and I don't know how much interest other programs had in him in years past or had conversations with him in prior off seasons, but it was very clear that obviously a lot of connections. South Carolina family lives here, as you mentioned yesterday. It was a perfect opportunity. Like, if this position doesn't come open at South Carolina, he's probably still the head coach at Georgia State, because I don't know if there was any other place that would be enticing enough for him to want to leave. Now, yeah, he was, go back to what I believe it was Matt Berry tweeted out about the conversation they had at the Senior Bowl a couple weeks ago, where according to him, he did say that, the NIL was something that he did not like having to deal with, but I don't think there's any coach around the country that likes dealing with it, but they understand that it's part of the job. And if you want to be successful at whatever program you're at, whether it be a Power 5 institution or a Group 5 institution, it's just a game that you unfortunately, have to play. And again, if the South Carolina thing didn't happen, he would have continued to do that at Georgia State. And who knows how much longer he would have been around. Again, you don't have a high bar for what success is supposed to be at Georgia State. And I think going to 5 bowl games in 7 years, it was a reason to probably stick around for a little bit longer as far as, them wanting to retain a head coach. But regardless, he's here now, and we're obviously thankful for the experience he's going to bring and, what he can potentially do with this tight end room and running back room as well.
Yeah, and, I think, for one, you look at the statement Elliott made before the press conference, and I think he provided this to ESPN. Maybe it was actually through Georgia State. I'm not sure, but he called it a personal decision as well. So I think we cannot – you can't lose sight of the fact that he mentioned it in the press conference itself. Hey, I've got a daughter and a son who are in high school right now. He's driving 3.5 hours back and forth to get to middle school football games during all this. And so, I think if Elliott – if this was an SEC head coaching job that Elliott was at, would he be leaving that to come be the tight ends and running game coordinator at South Carolina? I would wager probably not. And, if there were other big opportunities popping up professionally where it's, hey, your agent's telling you, hey, man, we're here and you're in the running for the Auburn job. You know what I'm saying? Just like some big job. Professionally, yeah, maybe you stick it out a little bit longer. But personally, he obviously wanted to get back. And then even, guys, when you peel back the layers professionally, I mean, he was making
$811.
Yeah, $811 as the head coach at Georgia State to deal with transfer portal, NIL, to drive back and forth. I don't know when he slept, honestly, with that amount of driving on his schedule.
The driving, during the week, driving to a game and then back, same day.
Yeah. So if on the surface, you're like, oh, head coach, tiny Division III program. That's not what we're saying. At the same time, yeah, $811,000 a year. Everybody sitting in this room and listening at home, most of you would sign up for that. But he's going to make $750,000 to come back home, to have a literal 5-minute commute to work. And, instead of being on the highways of Atlanta, he's going to be driving down Rosewood. So, and you're making $750 anyway to be the running game coordinator, which is something that's your passion anyway. To coach you add in non-scholarship guys. What is there? 8 guys in the tight end room, or something.
Like
and you're going to be around your family. It actually, the more you kind of unpeel the onion here,
Sure.
the layers. It's all. I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, but
I will.
there are a ton. There are a ton of positives. We don't get to be a head coach, and for some coaches, that's what you've always dreamed of, running your own program. But once, I think you said scratch that itch. Once you've scratched the itch, maybe you're like, this ain't the end-all, be-all of what I want to be as a coach.
Well, and again, it was a perfect scenario for him to be able to come back here. Again, he was practically living here anyway, coaching in Atlanta. Wonder how much he spent on gas in like a given year with that $811,000 salary going back and forth.
He got a raise.
Yeah.
Really. Like, by the number, he didn't get a raise, but you don't have to have a condo in Atlanta anymore.
And look, every coaching job has stress, but taking that stress element out of that is a plus too.
You added some years to your life, potentially, and your truck's not going to add all these miles either. So, I mean, he kind of came out ahead, honestly, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. And again, we're excited for him to be here. And this is, again, I've only been here about a year and a half, but every coaching hire that has taken place here so far, my time here, I've seen kind of mixed reactions on both sides. Like, well, it's good in that aspect and not so good in that aspect from the fan base as a whole, Twitter, message boards, all that kind of stuff. This has been the overwhelmingly most positive one I've seen. So many people are excited for Sean Elliott. And again, the element of him being there before, but his intensity, all that kind of stuff. This is something that really kind of, gives a little bit of juice to the fan base, seeing him back in the fold.
Yeah, it definitely does. He's a guy that's just always been beloved at South Carolina. It goes back to a couple things I think I mentioned when we first had this news coming out. Gamecock fans, it's probably not just Gamecock fans, right? It's probably fans anywhere, but especially here. I do think it's a little bit amplified here. You want guys who have a passion for the place, who want to be here. I think Gamecock fans have been a little bit maybe jaded by some past hires where you get like this hired gun type of feeling. And look, if they get the job done, great, But if you find somebody who really, really wants to be at a place, has that passion, wears it on their sleeve like Sean Elliott does, and then can do the job well and has been here for part of some very successful stints. Again, he was on that staff with Shane Beamer in 2010 when they went to Atlanta. And then Elliott was here, beyond that, 33-6 from 2011 to 2013, best run in school history. He was on staff and played, a key role in that in terms of development, some of the things that he brought to the staff.
Absolutely. So excited to see Sean Elliott get back in the fold. And again, it's a long off season, but we'll be excited to see what he does when the fall rolls around for the tight ends and the running backs as well. Jumping into some baseball conversation coming up next is the team off to a good start, 4-0 after picking up the win against Winthrop last night. Coming up tonight, taking on Queens, later this afternoon, taking on Queens at 4 o'clock out at Founders Park. Real quick, though, want to let you know about the Rivalry Friday ticket giveaway. If you want to go see the Gamecocks take on the Clemson Tigers next Friday, March the 1st out at Founders Park, go to our YouTube channel, The Game TV, give us or hit the subscribe button, then go online to 1075thegame.com and fill out the form for your chance to win, again, tickets to see the Gamecocks and the Tigers coming up next Friday, March 1st out at Founders Park. With the baseball conversation here from Coach Kingston as well, coming up next here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on The Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you on this Wednesday morning. Real quick before we jump into the baseball conversation, as always, we thank our friends over Firehouse Subs and Larry Chandler for supporting the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour.
Our main man, Larry, he got a shout-out from Don Staley last week.
Big time.
He gets a shout-out from us every day because this show is brought to you by our friends at Firehouse Subs. Head on over to firehousesubs.com or download the app, the easiest way to order the Rapid Rescue. Get your lunch, avoid the wait, order online. It's going to be waiting for you on the shelf when you get there. I actually just got an alert on my phone reminding me. I've already tried it, but it was reminding me if I hadn't already to try the new chicken Parmesan meatball sub with savory chicken meatballs, bright marinara sauce, shaved Parmesan, melted provolone, and crispy Italian seasoned breadcrumbs on a toasted garlic bread roll. Guess what, though? Available for a limited time only. So if you want to try it now. Try it today. It's almost lunchtime. FirehouseSubs.com and the Firehouse Subs app.
That's continued. There's no question about it. We've been very intentional about that, and we all want to feel like we're pulling on the same rope and following all the same mantras. And one of ours is no flinch, and he didn't flinch on that line drive in the third base box. And so, yeah, that's kind of who we are. We try to be blue collar, and players, coaches, everybody. And so, that was a fun little moment in that game.
That was Coach Kingston last night talking about Monty Lee avoiding a line drive down that third base line and getting a little bit of a flex afterwards, which, in the moment was funny, but also kind of represents how this team's gotten off to a start this season through 4 games, including last night with the 12-2 run rule victory over Winthrop. A lot of offense, as we expected to see starting out this season for the Gamecocks in what is Monty Lee's second year, in his role with helping the offense coming along. And again, last night picking up the 10-run victory over Winthrop, 4-0 to start the season. And again, kind of where we expected this team to be to start the competition level. Obviously not what it's going to be when we take on Clemson in a couple weeks, when we take on teams in the SEC later on in the season. But starting off the season the best way possible so far.
Yeah, would expect nothing less from Monty Lee over there. Tough guy, played in Kershaw County. Expect nothing less from him. And I think we've seen what he's done. I think in terms of the last couple of years, last year and now starting off this year with South Carolina's approach at the plate. And this team has kind of picked up where they left off in terms of, they're going to hit the long ball. Yeah, they're going to have some length to this lineup. And frankly, the length of this lineup is maybe coming from some guys that I didn't necessarily anticipate it. Like if you looked at it on paper, there are some transfers that I thought, that guy's probably going to step right in and play. And they maybe haven't. But then they've had some other transfers who have. And then I think just their willingness to, in these midweek games, to take their walks. And it can be maybe not fun. Everybody wants to swing the bat. It can get boring a little bit if you're a fan there. Or, these games kind of get long when all these pitching changes take place. But I think the key, South Carolina was good in these midweeks last year. I think the key to these midweek games is, frankly, just being willing to take your walks, to be selective about what you're going to swing at. And then, of course, once you do get runners on base, to make these teams pay. And that's what they did last night or yesterday afternoon in their first midweek of the year.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think we were talking after we talked to Stuart Lake before the season started, kind of talking to him about in the game of baseball, there's going to be some guys that step up that maybe you didn't expect. Maybe you thought they were a little bit farther away. Maybe you thought some guys were ahead of them. And there's always, once you get into the season, there's some surprises, right? And there probably been some of that early. We've only played 4 games, right? So it's very possible that midway through the season, especially when they're in conference play, maybe some of those things flip, right? And what I think, Wes, I don't know if this is the particular guys you were talking about, but for me, when I heard, Kennedy Jones is coming in, Austin Brenling's coming in, these are guys that, boom, you expect them probably on paper, right, come in. But instead, it's been some other guys, that have made maybe a little bit bigger of an impact. Tyler Causey, who we know is a very talented guy, after taking some time off, he's really hit the ground running, The other thing is when you look at this pitching staff, I think the thing we said going in is you weren't going to be able to make some like bold proclamation about the pitching staff after playing Winthrop in 3 games against Miami of Ohio. But what you did want to see is them not struggling, right? And so as a staff, I think mission accomplished. You have a combined no-hitter, for the first time since 2013. Roman Kimball, notably, looked outstanding. He looked potentially dominant, so that's something that, you check that box for sure. Some of your other guys look like you expected. So, and Eddie Copper, too. I mean, he rebounded, in a second game. So I think net positive. Now, there's a lot more to do. There's a lot more to see as the season progresses, but you check the boxes you wanted to early through 4 games.
And that's, again, going back to what I said a moment ago, the competition level is not what you're going to see on a week-in, week-out basis once you get into SEC play. But again, they're handling these teams the way they should, averaging, 11 runs a game, something like that. Average drawing about 11 walks a game as well, which is what they had last night against Winthrop. So a lot of good plate discipline there. You mentioned the pitching side of things, and I was very impressed with what Eddie Copper did last night, especially after, Friday goes out there, only tosses 5 pitches and gets pulled. So for a guy that comes in as a true freshman, you do worry about his confidence level, and he bounced back last night, went 4 innings, only giving up the 1 hit and no runs. And speaking of transfers, Ty Good came in from Carlton of Charleston, but very solid in his 2 appearances on Sunday and then last night as well. So again, we're still kind of learning a lot of things about these guys very early on in the season. Again, there's going to be highs and lows. Guys are going to cool off, but you mentioned Tyler Cossey. Blake Jackson's gotten off to a really good start as the leadoff guy for South Carolina. So we're still learning a lot about this team, and you do have the daunting task of Clemson coming to town coming up at the end of next week. So, a lot to be learned between now and then, but can't really ask for a better start than what we've seen so far.
Yeah, and you want to do this exact thing against opponents that, frankly, you're better, you're more talented than. And sometimes at this point of the season, you're actually already saying, "Whoa, there are some big question marks here based on what we've seen." And you see teams every year. Maybe they win 2 out of 3 and they're going, well, hey, you won the series, but there were some question marks along the way. Would it have been surprising if South Carolina had lost the game this weekend based on what we knew as far as question marks about their pitching staff and really the depth of their pitching staff and the health of the pitching staff going in? It wouldn't have been a shock. Instead, South Carolina went out, did what it was supposed to do so far, and I think you've got to be a little bit encouraged at this point. I always look at the whip as kind of a good indicator that doesn't get too deep into analytics and super complex stuff. But if your walks and hits per inning pitch allowed are at 1, that's exactly what this group is at as a staff right now, generally that's going to mean good things. It means you're obviously not giving up a lot of hits, but you're not giving up free bases. And so I think for this team, going back to talking to Stuart Lake last week, we knew this pitching staff, their focus was going to be to throw strikes and not put runners on. Well, sometimes when you do that, that can open up situations where you're going to get hit around a little bit. So far, other than a couple little situations here or there, that has not happened. And to your point, Tyler, Eddie Copper, had about the worst season debut you could have and just completely shut it out and pitched very, very well yesterday. And he's a guy they're going to need, obviously, whether it is midweek role, whether it's coming out of the bullpen. I imagine at this point, be a little bit of both.
Probably so, and they're still trying to kind of figure out what exactly they're going to do with the midweek and more of a staff night last night, and probably the same case tonight. You do have Matthew Becker getting the start tonight, and he's obviously come back from an injury, so similar to Robin Kimball on Sunday, I do imagine he's going to be on, or Kingston did say last night he's going to be on a pitch count, and depending on how well he performs, we'll kind of see how he factors in. He's somebody that could be in the conversation for a weekend role, as well. But again, had a good selection of guys, Jones, Eskew, and Kimball this past weekend. So we'll kind of see how that evolves as the season goes along. Speaking of which, I want to let you know that you can go online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. Each game, $25 gets added to the pot. If Gamecock hitter rips a Grand Slam, you could win the cash prize from Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union. Pot currently sitting at $100 through 4 games. Will go to $125 for tonight's game. So again, go to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win. As we head into this break, since we're talking about baseball, I have one more pair of tickets to give away to this afternoon's game as they take on Queens. First pitch at 4 o'clock, pregame coverage starting at 3:45 right here on the game. Caller number 3 right now, 803-404-6100. Win yourself a pair of tickets again to see baseball tonight against Queens out at Founders Park. Well, I know you guys are going to get a chance to talk about this. We'll talk about the weekend that was from a basketball standpoint coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
All right, I want to tell you about another one of our outstanding partners here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour here on the game. That is our guys at Integrated Media, Michael and Nathan. They can help take your home to the next level and make your home smarter. You may be wondering, what in the world is a smart home? Well, that is a home in which you can control all your lights, your thermostat, your devices, your sound system, all from one button on your phone. They can do it for you. Give them a call, 803-948-8327 or integratedmediainc.com. Michael, Nathan, his team, they can take care of everything from something as simple as mounting a TV to installing security and cameras or making your home into a smart home. Get some examples of their past work. Instagram and Facebook, Integrated Media Columbia, or visit their website, integratedmediainc.com, and that's 803-948-8327.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you on this Wednesday morning. We'll get into the basketball conversation here in just a second. But as always, we thank one of our newer partners here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, Classic City Roofing.
Yeah, Classic Roofing. Shout out to my friends Joe Reeder and Max Sawyer. ClassicRoofingSC.com, 803-590-7870. These guys have got a wealth of experience spanning more than 20 years. Their team of experts is well equipped to handle all of your roofing requirements. You know what? That could be a residential project like what they did for us at my home, a commercial undertaking, or really anything in between. They've got you completely covered. The mission is simple: to provide you with top-notch roofing solutions that will not only protect your property but also enhance its curb appeal. Again, 803-590-7870. If you go to ClassicRoofingSC.com right now, you can get more information on their services. Also, you can set up a free estimate. They're going to come out to your home. They're going to fly the drone. They're going to get on your roof. They're going to check out any aspects that maybe need fixing. And also, they're going to tell you, hey, this roof has 10 years. Hey, this roof has 2 years. Hey, the roof looks great. It's going to be a long time before you even need to call us again. Whatever those answers are going to be, they're going to help you make sure that your home is protected. And really, frankly, the most important part of your house is putting that roof over your head. 803-590-7870.
So the Sean Elliott conversation kind of dominated yesterday. Didn't really get it to jump into this, but basketball in action on Saturday, coming off the tough loss to Auburn on the road right at a week ago, and unfortunately falls for a second time in a row, this time to LSU 64-63. And this was a game that looked like South Carolina had pretty well in hand with the 15, 16-point lead there in the second half, and LSU was able to slowly chip away and come away with the victory there at the end. Jacoby Wright missing that three-pointer there at the very end of the game. And I talked about this with Jack a little bit earlier. You know, he does not think, and I don't think it is either, kind of a time to panic with this team because you still have all your goals out in front of you, but certainly hoping to get back on track this upcoming weekend, taking on Ole Miss on the road.
Yeah, it's not time to panic, but it's also, I think, fair to acknowledge that, you know, brutal losses can happen in basketball. We see that all the time, but that was certainly a pretty brutal loss for South Carolina, considering the context surrounding it. One, you're looking at what happened at Auburn. We don't have to relive that. But then you're at your house, good crowd, LSU team that's been down this year, and you have a 16-point second-half lead. So you've done everything you need to do to bounce back. You've done everything you need to do to put yourself in a position to, I would dare say, almost completely solidify your position in the tournament, because you would have had your 22nd win. You've got some big wins, and then all the games you have left are against teams that, win or lose, are actually going to kind of be beneficial to your strength of schedule and probably your net ranking. Now, you've just put a little added pressure on yourself down the stretch. You look at all these teams that are left: at Ole Miss, at Texas A&M, Florida at home. They're now in the top 25. Tennessee, we know how good they are. And then traveling to Mississippi State. I mean, all 5 of these teams are tournament teams, or a couple of them maybe right on the border there, but all 5 of these teams are potentially tournament teams.
Yeah, that's
so Chris, I was gonna say, it's you got to avoid the worst case scenario, and that is that this thing spirals. And if you had just held on against LSU, I felt like you would have built up enough of a buffer that, you don't want to lose your last 5, even, if you won the game. But still, it just it takes some of the pressure off. I think you don't want to sort of have that, the message now being about South Carolina. If you lose on Saturday, the message now becomes, oh, they've lost 3 straight. It becomes a thing at that point. You don't want it to become a thing, because sometimes those things snowball and then it creates even more pressure.
Well, and that's what this team's been able to avoid all year because of, they didn't have obviously a juggernaut non-conference schedule, but they got through it. Aside from losing to a good Clemson team at Clemson, they came through that unscathed. Then they got into conference play and held serve. You know, the only really disappointing loss you had was that home loss against Georgia, but they situated things because of the good work they did in non-conference and in the conference schedule. By the time they went to Tennessee on January 30th, what were we saying? We were like, you don't have to go win this game. You know, you don't have to capture this huge win to bolster your resume because your resume is already good. Well, they were able to go win that game. And so now you're feeling great about it, right? Then you go to Georgia and win. You hold on against Ole Miss at home. You lose badly to Auburn. That was another one where it was like just a flush-it game. But now you've lost this one. You've lost 2 in a row. We've talked all year about how this team's been really good facing adversity, not getting too high, not getting too low. And this will be, I think, another one of those tests just to see how they respond.
And I can't think of a better week than what ends up setting up this week, where you don't have a midweek game. You have the entire week, get some extra practices in before you go on the road to Ole Miss on Saturday. Kind of a chance to readjust, kind of, look inward a little bit. And, again, we don't look at Lamont Paris as this, over-the-top fiery guy or anything like that. But I imagine there's some intensity coming away from 2 tough losses like that. That, again, you're going on the road to an Ole Miss team on Saturday that played you very close in Colonial Life Arena a couple weeks ago, had that 3-point shot that, unfortunately, South Carolina did not end up getting called for a foul on there at the very end that certainly helped them with that victory. So there's a lot of familiarity there, and again, going on the road to Oxford's obviously not an easy place to play, but we'll see how much they benefit from having a couple extra days of not having a game to play in the midweek this week.
Yeah, and I think having time off can go both ways. And if you're South Carolina, you want to obviously reset a little bit, and you want to hopefully get back to what you were doing before. I think the most disappointing thing about that loss on Saturday, other than the obvious that, you had a 16-point lead, is you just kind of made decisions late that were uncharacteristic, right? Like, this has been a veteran squad, and no team is perfect. You can watch any team in the country. They can be the most veteran, sound decision-making team out there, and you can pick and say, well, hey, they weren't making good decisions for this stretch. And usually, there's a timeout, there's a refocus, and then you're fine. Unfortunately for South Carolina, down the stretch of this game, multiple occasions of just not executing and making the decisions we are, for the most part, used to seeing them make. So I think that was the disappointing part. It stings a little bit extra when you miss opportunities. And you just, for South Carolina's sake, you hope you don't look back on this season and say that this loss was the equivalent of like losing to Florida in football, and that's the one you circle and you say it was right there, you should have won the game, it snowballed, you didn't win, and now it's following you for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and there were a lot of things I think that happened if you look at the second half. The shots weren't going in. The free throw line, you didn't do, certainly left some points out there. The turnovers just kind of got out of their game. That's something we've said. They haven't gotten out of their game many times this season. Even when the shots aren't falling, right? You can still look, say, okay, they're getting good shots. There were some times where it just looked a little bit disjointed. And then LSU, to their credit, Wright, Miles Stude's former teammate who transferred to LSU, he got to the line multiple times at the end. I know everybody's saying, the Colin Murray-Boyles reach-in should have been a tie-up, not a foul. I get that, and I agree, actually. But when you look back, I go back to 16-point lead at halftime, right? And that's not something that should happen, especially at home, especially against a team that, is not as upper echelon as the ones that they're frankly about to see down this last 5-game stretch. But this team has responded well typically, and so they're going to have an opportunity to do that on the road.
Absolutely. And again, that next game coming up on Saturday, taking on Ole Miss out there in Oxford. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game. Welcome back in Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark. Speaking of Firehouse Subs, I don't think we can get enough of telling people how great it is. I mean, it's almost noon. It's almost lunchtime. If you're in the car driving, I mean, there's 14 locations around the Midlands. There's one near you right now.
Yeah,
statistically speaking.
Statistically, yeah, you're absolutely correct. My wife and I visited the Lake Murray location the other day. Got ourselves some lunch. Recommend checking out the new chicken parmesan and meatball sub. Chicken meatballs that are savory with bright marinara, shaved parmesan, melted provolone, and the crispy Italian seasoned breadcrumbs on a toasted garlic bread roll. That is for a limited time only. So if you haven't had it yet, make sure you check it out. If you have had it and you're like, yeah, that sounds pretty good, I'd like to get that a second, third, fourth, fifth time, make sure you do it while it's still here. And as Tyler said, there's one closest to you. Easiest way to check out where the closest one is, firehousesubs.com to use the Rapid Rescue to avoid the wait and order online, or download the Firehouse Subs app. Earn yourself some rewards on future purchases. Use the Rapid Rescue to order yourself a sandwich to go.
One more thing to wrap up from the weekend. Women's team in action taking on Georgia on Sunday. A little squirrely there in the first half, down at halftime. Once again, like they were against Tennessee the other night, finding a way to rebound in the second half to pull away for the 14-point victory there to claim the SEC regular season record of 43 consecutive wins with regular season games, and conference continuing on their undefeated streak so far this season, still in pursuit of the national championship already. I talked about this a little bit earlier, and Sarah and I talked about this too. You know, losing a game wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for this team. You obviously want them to keep winning, but when you talk about having a little bit of fuel to light the fire for going into the NCAA tournament here in a couple weeks, these are the closest things besides losing a game that can hopefully kind of ignite that fire a little bit under this team that has, up to this point, been pretty flawless.
Well, at this point, I think you're past the point of wanting to lose one because you're chasing greatness at this point. And as much as they have accomplished, you know, an undefeated season, regardless of sport, regardless of time, you know, what era we're talking about, to go undefeated is to be perfect, is to be flawless. And that's something, you know, last year's squad was undefeated all the way up to the loss to Iowa. And you know, we talked all year long about what they have the opportunity to be that. And, you know, I think for South Carolina, that's what you're chasing here. Once you accomplish that, you've kind of done just about everything you can possibly do as a program. And, you know, I do think, though, it's probably been beneficial for there to be a little adversity along the way, because when South Carolina plays their game, when they play well, when they execute, I don't know if anybody can actually beat them, but they're human beings, so you're not going to play to your potential every single time out there, but you want to have as many kinks worked out, obviously, as you can before you get into games that are win or go home.
Yeah, I actually asked the other day, got in a conversation, does South Carolina need to lose a game? And it came out exactly, the response was exactly what you said, Wes. No, you're chasing history. You're chasing greatness. And I think this team has had enough scares, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, not actually losing a game, not getting down to the final 30 seconds and you're just not sure which way it's going to go. But they've had close games. They've had scares. They had one against Georgia where for much of the game you're in kind of a very, very unexpected dogfight. And so they've had some adversity. I think they've had some moments that have kind of humbled them. And it's been fascinating to see where this team has come from losing all the freshies from that great class to having a team that had a lot of newness and a lot of players that were stepping up into much bigger roles for the first time, adding some other pieces. And a team that Dawn Staley, quite frankly, from some of her public comments, wasn't quite sure about how good they could be. And now you see what they are. They've come a long way in a short period of time. But I think some of the challenges that they've had on the court, when they've had them, they've passed those tests, and I think those things have helped them along the way too.
You mentioned Don Staley not really knowing how good this team is going to be. Obviously, the freshman class moving on at the end of last season, and they were 6th in the preseason AP poll. Nobody expected them to go through this year undefeated. No, I think a lot of people still expect them to be in the mix for the national championship, which they obviously are. Does that lessen the pressure, though, the fact that you didn't have those expectations coming in to the season, even though you're this deep in still undefeated?
Lessen the pressure now?
Maybe not now.
I mean, I think at this point, even though it's a new cast of characters, for the most part, you're right back to being the hunted if you're South Carolina. And, you're the only undefeated team that's left. You are the Vegas favorite to win the whole thing at this point. And honestly, is there even... sometimes at this point, there's like this big discussion about, hey, is it South Carolina or this team that's truly the best team in the country? Is that even a conversation right now? This is the best team who's even in the conversation?
No, everybody talk like there's a different conversation. It's just Caitlin Clark. How good is she? Like historically.
Yeah, but
right?
Nobody's saying
but
Iowa.
Nobody's like Iowa the
better
team, right?
Than South Carolina. So I mean, that brings a different type of pressure in that a lot of other people are waiting on you to sort of be knocked off your perch. And now I'll say this, the best thing for women's basketball, they got to line this thing up for a South Carolina-Iowa rematch.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what college athletics wants and needs.
Absolutely. Women's team back in action coming up tomorrow night, taking on Alabama, 7 o'clock at Colonial Life Arena. You can listen to that right here on The Game. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show, myself, Terry Ford, coming up right here on The Game.